Hey everybody, it's Josh Alexander, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking to both Anthony Tai, the owner of Connection Real Estate Inc., a property management company, as well as bringing back Dino, the owner of California Coastal Loans, and we're going to be discussing investment properties. So first, I want to bring on Anthony so we can go over what it takes to be a landlord, some things you need to watch out for in terms of your tenants, screening them, the legal paperwork side of it, and just some pros and cons of doing it yourself versus having a property management company take care of it for you. And then we're going to switch to talking to Dino and talk about more of the financial side. So what you need to actually do to purchase an investment property or secondary home, what the financing looks like, and how it's different than buying a primary residence. So you have a pretty good complete picture of what you need to know going into being a landlord, going into investing in these type of properties before you start the process. So let's get into it. I'd like to welcome Anthony right here.
Thanks for the warm welcome, Josh.
Absolutely. So we're going to dive right into it. So a couple of questions I have for you today. I mean, there's a bunch we can discuss with landlords, and I know we can be talking for hours on it, but let's kind of narrow it down to a few, at least starter questions for people that are thinking about the possibility of becoming a landlord. So the first one that I have for you today is, if someone is thinking about buying and managing an income property, what are the top 3 things that you can think of that they need to know about property management before they get into it?
It's a lot. It's a very good question. So I think first and foremost, what I always like to tell my owners is it's an investment property. Invest in it. A lot of people, a lot of owners, tenant broke it or it's broken. You know, I don't need to fix it. But owners should maintain a sense of habitability for the property. So you got to invest in it, and you got to make it nice and keep everyone happy, because they're living there and they're helping pay for everything. The second thing is fair housing rules. Ideally, an owner should only need to deal with a new tenant every so often, not too much, because every time there's a tenant turnover, you have to release the property, you have to clean it up and make it all nice and fresh again. And fair housing is really easy to go awry. No, not awry. It's really easy to violate, because not everyone knows it, and there's some practices that people see that think are normal but are actually in violation of fair housing. And the third is how to screen tenants. Again, most owners don't screen tenants all that often, so they don't really know what to look out for. And by and large, most tenants, I call them residents, are good people. But sometimes you have to, having done it for a few years, you pick some bad apples, and then you learn real quick what the signs are.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, I hear you talk about all the time as well, is that, if you have the wrong tenant, especially with the new laws and everything coming out, it's getting harder and harder and harder to get rid of a bad tenant and make sure you have that right person in there. So it's extremely important that you do have the right person in there to begin with, so you don't have these issues come up down the line. So
totally agree.
Yeah, I completely agree with that one. Because I know I hear the nightmare stories all over. And like I said, with the new restrictions, especially the ones that have just happened recently, if you have someone in there, it's extremely hard to get them out. Okay. Yep. So next one I have for you. So what are some of the risks? So, we talked about a little bit with the new restrictions, everything, but what are some of the other risks of managing a property yourself?
The risks of managing the property yourself. I think that what first-time owners or first-time landlords need to know is how to properly, screen. It's the back. What we talked about, screening.
Mm-hmm.
But that aside, I think the risk is record keeping, and forms and documentation. Most self-managing owners, they get payment either from check or cash. Checks are much better, but the tenant should get a receipt so everyone can know they paid it. They should keep a log of rent was paid here, rent was paid here, because ideally you should never use those records. But if you need to, the records are there to save you. And the proper forms, because if you're not a part of a professional organization, an apartment association, California Association of Realtors, or what have you, or an attorney maybe, you probably don't have access to the correct forms or language for the leases, for notices, just because we live in California, and it's just for a more specific California issue that we need specialized language in these forms. And if you're part of an association or whatever, what have you, the forms are there for you to use.
Yeah, I mean, with that too, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people out there, especially first-time landlords, that will go through and kind of have these verbal contracts and maybe something minimal in writing, something on one page they made themselves, and something that I point out all people all the time in terms of when they're purchasing a property, but these contracts that are made up by these organizations are done so with a very specific goal in mind, is that to keep you legally protected. So
Correct.
You can write your own language, but if you have a couple words incorrectly on there, it really exposes yourself to a lot of legal risks. So that's one thing when you are becoming a landlord, is you really have to dive in, do a lot of research, and make sure that you're using those proper forms, because if you're not and something does happen, you do have a liability that you have to worry about as a landlord. And that's one of the biggest risks that I see as being a landlord doing it yourself, is if you don't have the training and you don't know what is legal and what's not legal, which it changes all the time. I mean, we just saw the updates that have just updated. And then with COVID-19, there's a bunch of new things that just updated. So not only is making sure that you're keeping on top of your tenant for payments of big importance, but you do have to make sure you're keeping on top of all of the legal things that are happening, because it puts you at a big risk and a big legal risk if you can't keep up and make sure that you're doing everything by the book. And like you said, keeping that log of everything that happens with the property, payments, any kind of repairs, all that stuff is extremely important. So that way you have some kind of physical evidence to go back to if needed, and along with using those forms as well. So that being said, on the flip side of that, so let's say someone wants to go through and they want to purchase an investment property, but they're saying, okay, maybe it is a little bit too much for me to handle. I don't really want to go out of the gate and spend half of my time trying to figure out all these laws and that type of thing. What's some other big advantages of working with a property management company, hiring a property management company to do some of this behind the scenes work for you?
Okay, so I guess the flip side of self-managing versus hiring someone is, one, because I'm part of two professional organizations, soon to be three, I keep up to date with all the news and have all the correct forms, and are able to give the notices and do all that for the owner. Second thing is, because I've been doing this for a little while, I've run into my share of problems, and the owner is the benefit of my my experience, right? Yeah, I've told you, Jez, there's a lot of issues that I've come across, and And the third one is, any property management company specialist that owner will work with has specialized programs that keep track of everything. I have a specialized software that the tenant logs into to pay rent, to make maintenance requests. I'm able to talk to the owner through that. And that's all to kind of keep everything on schedule, on track, because let's be honest, we're all busy. And if a person is self-managing it, they can probably deal with it and realize one or two maintenance requests just to kind of keep on top of it. But if an owner has two or three, and then has a crying baby at home and has an issue at work and yada, 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 things may, he may forget, she may forget. So those are the things that I have to keep on top of manager. And I guess fourthly, I'm able to kind of learn from my other owners and kind of see how they've done, and maybe share certain strategies with everyone.
Got it. Okay. And so with hiring someone in terms of property management, I know the big question a lot of people have is how much are they expecting to pay? Is it like a certain percent usually of every month, or are they paying a certain dollar amount per year, a set amount? What do you typically see? I know everybody is a little bit different in terms of what they charge, but what do you typically see in terms of what this is actually going to cost, these type of services where they're doing a lot of the back work and the legwork for you? What are they going to be costing to get this type of thing done?
Got it. Okay, so I guess let me kind of break it down. So you and I are both realtors. We know each other from the real estate sphere, and there are certain standards that we are used to, just because it's how things just shape up. Whereas with property management, it's more of in terms of fee structure, more of a Wild West kind of feel to it, because not everybody. There's no standard industry rate. Everyone is a little different, some way, shape, or form. Some take a flat percentage every month, and if rent goes up, they take more of that percentage. Some are flat fee, like me. Some have a tenant placement fee. Some don't. So, but in general, fees range anywhere from 4 to 12% of the month. Tenant placement fees range. Some charge on the first year, some charge half a month, a full month. It all kind of ranges. So it kind of depends. Some property management companies have in-house maintenance. I don't. I'm not big enough to. Some do, and so they're able to maybe either pass on those savings or able to effectively contribute to the owner's bottom line by having someone there all the time and kind of keeping the tenant happy when there's any issues.
Okay. And in terms of going back and finding new tenants, I mean, so you're saying that some people will charge for that, some people won't. Is that a giant fee? So obviously the goal of being a landlord, especially if you're looking at like a long-term rental versus an Airbnb type of thing, is to find someone that works well. You screen them. They're going to live in there for years at a time, because that's going to make everyone's life easier. But in the worst case scenario where you have to go through and maybe it takes 5 or 6 tenants before you find that perfect one, what kind of fees can someone expect to be paying if they do charge fees? Have you seen kind of I know you were talking about more of a Wild West type of thing, but have you seen what people usually charge in order to find a new tenant for the property? And does that include everything from like placing it on the MLS, the pictures, all that kind of stuff? Or is that just a fee and then all that stuff is additional to that as well?
Again, it kind of depends. Some property management companies charge a fairly low fee for the tenant placement. I know of a company that charges maybe half a month for tenant placement, but they don't have for professional photos will be an extra upcharge. Some charge a full month, but they don't list it on the MLS. They only list it everywhere else. Some charge a very low fee, a flat fee, and what I've seen is if they charge a low fee, they'll charge extra for everything else. Those that charge a higher fee tend to just include everything for professional photos and screening and all that. I personally use a screening service that also gets what's it called, verifies references, and helps make applications nice and orderly. So everyone's a little different, but more or less low with add-ons or all-encompassing higher fees. And it depends what the owner wants.
Okay, got it. I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying too, this is something when you are looking at becoming a landlord and possibly hiring a property management company. I mean, these to be asking, so you need to figure out, and so you don't get stuck into these contracts from saying, hey, what do you actually charge if this tenant doesn't work out? How does that process work? So you want to make sure you have a lot of these questions prepared before you start the process of looking for that property manager, because if they can't answer them, or if they're answering them saying they're going to be charging an extremely higher amount than anybody else, then I mean that's an easy indication that maybe you don't want to work with them. So as someone that's looking to become someone that's looking to become income property investment, that type of thing, it's something that you want to make sure that you have those questions prepared. So those are excellent questions, like you said, Anthony, to be able to talk to them about how their whole process works, what kind of fees do they charge, and then most importantly, what's included in those fees. Because like you said, you can find that low cost leader of someone that's going to go through and do the property management for cheap, but what is that actually costing you? You're going to have more of a headache, and if it does come to need to doing something done to your property or finding a new tenant, are you paying all these extra fees to have that happen and not making it worth it? It's great questions to ask when you're trying to talk to these possible property management companies when you're interviewing. So I know you just kind of alluded to it a little bit on that last conversation, but one of the things I want to know is, like, what is your best practices for screening tenants? Because you were kind of saying that's one of the most important things to really look at, and I agree. And I've said it already a couple times on this episode. If you don't have the right person in place, you don't have the right tenant in place, it's going to make your life miserable. So the easiest way to make your life as easy as possible is to have that great tenant. So how do you go about screening tenants, and what are some of the things that you've learned from being in the industry that landlords should be looking out for as they're looking through these list of tenants that were applying to the property?
Yep. Oh, this is a loaded question, and I can go on and on and on, but I'll keep it short and sweet. First and foremost, fair housing. You have to know fair housing. You have to understand that you can't discriminate based on a lot of things. We don't need to go into it on this episode, but it's a screen based on fair housing. That aside, I screen based on income and credit and other factors, but mostly that. So I do, when an owner is first screening, they need to ask for pay stubs. They need to check references. They need to ask for, I also ask for bank statements, 2 months of everything, 2 months of checked pay stubs, 2 months of bank statements. The reason why is you want to make sure they are employed and they have a job and they are, what's it called? The creditworthiness is good. They don't owe anyone else money. Their credit should be, the low standard I use is at least 625. If everyone pays their bills on time, there's no collection. 625 should be relatively easy to achieve. But if those collections start happening, those late payments start happening, you have to wonder, they're late with these bills. Are they going to be late with rent? And one of the big flags is if they see a collection from another property management company or individual, because if they owe people money, I mean, owing a cell phone bill is one thing, or a medical bill is one thing, but if they owe people money, that's another issue, right?
Yeah.
Yep. But also, the owner should definitely call current and at least pass landlords if possible. Some don't provide verbal confirmations, so it has to be an email or something signed.
Got it.
I expect at least 2 years. I want at least 2 years. If they are self-employed, and let's be honest, you and I are, I need to see 2 years tax returns. And I kind of go deep because I've been burned before, unfortunately. And we have to make sure these applicants they pass our screening process, and an owner should know what their guidelines, their own guidelines are, what the credit minimum, any sort of delinquent or negative credit things that they are able to consider or not consider, and the amount of amount of income needed to qualify. And in California, it's max 3 times. So if the rent is $3,000, the applicant needs to make at least $9,000 gross.
Okay, got it. And so with all those screening processes in place, I mean, how involved are you? Are you screening everybody and giving all the information from every tenant that's applying to the landlords that you're working with? Are you screening them and saying, hey, these are the top ones based on my recommendation? Or how are you relaying the information, and how involved is a landlord if they're using your system and using your property management company versus them doing it themselves?
I screen everyone. I ask for a lot of documentation, a lot of what I just mentioned, and maybe and then some. And luckily, due to technology, I'm able to streamline a lot of things. I screen everybody, and to be perfectly honest, I think because I ask for so much, the people that don't really want the house they kind of walk away because I need to make sure they're qualified. I screen everyone digitally until we are down to the one we're going to select. Then I'll verbally call and confirm the employment and current residence, just because of that. That's obviously very important. And I trust technology up to a point, and it helps me get to a point. But until like we get there, there's too many applicants to properly screen, to verbally call everyone. So that's what technology is there for.
Got it. And then, I mean, in Orange County and in this area specifically, I mean, how is the market looking for rentals right now with everything going on? I mean, is there still a lot of people, when you place a property up for rent, is there a lot of applicants coming in? Have you seen a giant drop in numbers? Has there been any kind of significant data one way or another that you can kind of see that's having a major effect based on everything going on with COVID-19?
Anecdotally speaking, Josh, I have a rental or two or three for rent every month at least. And if I do my job right, if I put it on the market at the right number, and if I good marketing, good video, good photos, I should be bombarded with calls. That means it's at market. If I can't keep up, that means I placed it below market. But if I'm at market, I should rent that place out within about 30 to 60 days, 30 to 45 days, depending on what time of year, because time of year does matter in our little Orange County area. And I sidetracked. What was
No, I mean, that was, how active is the rental market basically? I mean, it sounds like then there hasn't been a major drop in terms of people looking for homes during the whole crisis. And it seems like as long as you price it properly, which is another thing you want to bring up when you're talking about managing it yourself versus having someone else do it. If you have a property management company, hopefully they have a process in place to be able to go through the recent rentals in the area and know the comps correctly, so they're not underpricing it. Because that is one more issue you can get into doing it yourself, is if you don't have access to all the data, which, I mean, you have some data, you can find some things on Zillow and that type of thing. But if you don't have access to all the data and you don't price the property right, and if you have that tenant in there long term, you can only raise the rent a certain amount. And so you could be really losing a lot of money at the beginning if you don't place it on the market correctly at the right price, because over years and years and years, especially if you find that good tenant, like I said, there's only a certain amount percentage wise you can raise it every year without getting legally in trouble.
Well,
that's something that you really have to.
I need can I add something on, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay. So with the rent control applies to obviously apartments, most apartments. But it doesn't apply to single family homes. There is actually no rent cap. But you can't, let's say I'm renting for a house for $1,000. He can't next month raise it. If I'm on a month to month, he can't just raise it to $10,000 next month. There is a timeline, but there is no cap right now that I'm aware of in residential single family dwellings is what they call it.
Yeah, just there's a percentage you have to stay within in terms of raising it at a time on there. So
correct. Within
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the big thing, is if you price it incorrectly at the beginning, not only losing money at the beginning, but if you continue to not watch the market and not keeping up with the rental rates, then you could be losing a lot of money that way too. One more thing that I'm sure on your end that you're looking at every time a new lease comes up to do, or another new property comes up that you're renting, is making sure that you have it marketed properly, but also have it priced correctly, so you're getting the maximum amount of money you can out of that property based on the market conditions and area and all that type of thing.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, I mean, I know we can be talking about this forever, but I'm trying to keep these down to about 30 minutes. So I think that's enough at least for this time. If anybody has questions about the whole landlord process, about what it takes to become a landlord, about what exactly property management can do to you, what's the best place they can reach you at? I'll go ahead and pop it up. I mean, I know you get the email and everything, so I'll pop it up on there. But for people that are listening, and don't have the ability to watch it, what's the best way for them to reach you at?
I have the best is to email me, Anthony@connectionrealestateinc.com. I have a website that I really need to update at orangecountyhomestoday.com. And my best phone number, text is the best, is 949-424-7688.
Perfect. Okay, and I'll link that up in the show notes too. So if anybody that is listening to this and not watching it, feel free to check that out for additional information. If you have any questions, you can either leave it in the comment section below, or you can talk to Anthony directly, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any additional questions you might have. So just to summarize what we talked about today, it seems like becoming a landlord and doing it yourself, there is still some pros to it. I mean, you do have that extra money coming in every month. You have an asset, your home, or second home in this case, appreciating. So over the long term, you're not only getting appreciation, but you're also having monthly checks come in from those tenants. And if you do it correctly, find the right tenant up front, the workload will be significantly lower. However, some of the big risks involved of being your own landlord and doing everything yourself really comes down to the legal process and making sure that you know, one, when you're getting that tenant into the place, making sure that you don't have any discrimination going on, you're making sure that all the forms are legal. So if something happens to the tenant while they're there, you need to make sure you're protected. So if you don't have those legal things in place and you don't have the right contracts, you are opening yourself up to some big risks. And then second, it's time consuming. So if you don't have the time, you're pretty busy as it is right now, or you just don't want to put that much extra time into it, hiring a property management company might not be the worst idea, because for a fee, they're able to do a lot of that legwork for you, take care of all the background stuff. They're able to go through anytime that the tenant has anything to be repaired, they bounce it off the property management first. If you need a new tenant, the property management company takes care of that. They have all the legal forms for you. So in terms of making sure the process is streamlined, it's a little bit more efficient to do it that way. So if you're okay with giving up a little bit of money per month to have that service done, then it's going to benefit you in the long term and probably take a lot of that headache away from being a landlord. So there is definitely some pros and cons on it. Now, for you, Anthony, I know we talked about a lot and we could be going on for hours, but is there anything else that you want to leave everybody with in terms of something we haven't talked about, or just kind of wrapping it up in terms of being a landlord or using a property management company?
Major stuff, I guess, to summarize and to kind of leave everyone on a good note. It's this stuff. Being a landlord is great because you're able to provide someone a home they can create memories on with, a home they are able to feel safe in. You're providing shelter, and I think that's great. And what the tenant is helping, the owner in turn is helping with, paying down the mortgage, paying and depreciating. I would definitely talk to an accounting professional if you are a homeowner that is looking to rent out their home, and definitely talk to an estate planning attorney. Specifically, maybe trust and wills. Anyway, anything more specific, please give me a call.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I appreciate all the information you gave me today. Thanks for coming on. There's a lot of good info in there. Again, if anybody has any information or any other questions, feel free to comment below or leave a message, and Anthony will get back to you on there. So thanks a lot, Anthony. And we'll go ahead and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Josh. Bye.
Yep. Okay, so thanks again, Anthony. So now we're actually going to bring on Dino, which we talked to last week, the broker owner of California Coastal Loans, and we're going to go over some of the financial things you need to think about in terms of buying that investment property or second home, and what you need to consider on that end before pulling the trigger and buying that secondary property. So I'd like to welcome Dino again to the show, and let's go over some of those questions that people might have about the loan side of purchasing that second home or investment property. Two big questions really is, one, how does financing an income property differ from financing a property you plan on living in?
Yeah, for the most part, it's all still the same thing that we normally would do on the first. The only benefit that makes it a little bit easier. So a lot of times people, they get scared, like, oh gosh, I already have this one house, I don't know how I'm going to qualify for another one. So here's how it works. Let's say you buy this other house and you got a house payment of $3,000 on that house. And then this investment property, right, that you're buying, your payment is $3,000, but your rent is also $3,000, or proposed rent, right? So the appraiser does what they call a rent survey, comes back at $3,000. We're allowed to use 75% of whatever dollar amount that appraiser says that house is capable of getting. And then from there, right? We offset the mortgage payment of $3,000. So the difference, whatever it is, that's it. That's how much you have to qualify for. It's actually really easy. It's one of the easiest things to qualify for. The difficult part is how much money you need. So for the most part, you need 20% down for an investment property. There's a few places where you can do 15, but you're not going to get a very good loan, and for the most part, it's gonna end up costing you a lot more money. So don't be in such a hurry. Just save up the other 5% and get it, and you'll be fine. And qualifying for an investment property is actually really easy.
Got it. Okay. And then the other question I have before we wrap this up for you is, what is the main difference when you're financing a second home versus an investment property? Because one, what is the difference in general, but also two, what's the difference in terms of financing?
Yeah, for sure. So big difference. A second home, the big difference is the second home interest rate is significantly better than the investment property. So for the most part, we're talking it's almost identical. Second home and owner occupied, your primary residence, are pretty much identical. You're going to get a great rate. So right now, for example, under 3% on second homes is phenomenal. On an investment property, however, you're not going to get that great rate. It is going to be higher. And in general, I've always kind of used the rule of thumb. It's about a 0.5 point higher in interest rate. But I got to tell you, right now, the market's so just kind of wacky and all over the place, and the way the banks are pricing. Quite often, I'm finding that it's 0.75 of a point and even a full percentage higher for an investment property than what it was. Now, know that interest rates get better for every 5% that you put down, right? So if you put down 20%, the rate might be one thing, but as soon as you put down 25, it gets a lot better. And that's kind of the magic number. So it takes 20 to really qualify for an investment property, but at 25% down, you see a big shift. Everything starts to change, and the interest rates get a lot better. So that's also, I find a lot of times, the magic number of being able to cash flow properly and having yourself be put in a good situation as far as, not just the qualifying part, but how it's going to look down the road for you. And as far as qualifying goes, like I said, just in the previous one, it's you have a rental amount associated, you have the payment. The difference is all you really qualify for. It's quite easy.
Got it. And I know that you've owned some investment properties in the past. So just real quick before we go, what are some of the things that you're looking for when you're looking to purchase an investment property or a second home in general?
Yeah. And actually, I just thought of something on the previous question, if I can just add to it real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the investment property, super easy to qualify for. On the second home, much, much harder, because now you're qualifying for your primary residence and the full payment of the second home, right? Because a lot of people, and I'm going to lead into this next question here, a lot of people think a second home, I'm going to Airbnb it a little bit, I'm going to do this, but if the bank knows that's what your intention is, then it's not a second home, it's actually an investment property, and you're not going to get that great rate. So ideally, you want to pull off a second home, get the best interest rate possible, and that's going to save you thousands of dollars over the term of the loan. Now, down the road, if you turn it into an investment property, that's okay. It is what it is. However, up front, it has to make sense. So on a second home, for example, if you're buying it out in the middle of nowhere, how is it a second home or a vacation home? Like, what's the purpose of you buying this home out in the middle of nowhere as a vacation home, right? However, if it was to a golf course or a lake or the beach or something like that, Palm Springs, oftentimes everyone knows, is a vacation area. That's an instant, like, no-brainer. Every underwriter is going to believe it's really going to be your second home, right? So that's the big thing. I think the guideline is like 50 miles. It has to be 50 miles from your current residence in order to qualify for a second home, and has to make sense. So then going into your next question, like what are some of the things that I look for? So I owned a lot of property over the years, and in the early years, I would buy stuff, it was like this, just a feeding frenzy, right? Like, you just buy whatever you can buy. Next thing you know, the house is worth an extra $100,000 more than what you paid for it. And any fool can make money in real estate, because all you had to do was get it, and it was going up until it didn't. after 2008, everything changed and a lot of lessons were learned. My big lesson is, I was making good money. So I was like, okay, no big deal. That particular house is $500 underwater every month. That house is $1,000 underwater every month. No big deal. But you do that enough times, and now your monthly outlay is quite expensive. And then when one little thing goes wrong, whether it be your job, or your tenant stops paying or whatever, you find yourself in a world of trouble. So don't go into it in this like fool's gold feeding frenzy type of a deal, right? Work some numbers, know what you're capable of doing, know you're capable of managing that property, even if something goes wrong. Give you an example. I had this one property, went vacant. No big deal. We're going to re-rent it, right? Well, it took a couple months to rent it. And then when we finally found somebody that was interested in it, and, realtor took them up there to show it, got a phone call from the realtor and said, your house has about 2 feet of water throughout the house. So a pipe had broke and just water everywhere. Well, guess what? That house was unrentable for almost a year. We had to completely dry the whole thing out, redo everything. It took about a year. That you have to be able to afford if you're doing. So that stuff like that does happen, believe it or not. And you hope it doesn't happen, but you got to be able to afford the house you buy as an investment property. The other thing that you should do is look at the cash flow of it. And speculation is sometimes necessary, but also very dangerous. So be conservative in your ways of thinking. I think that is the best way to go. The new thing that we have going on is Airbnb, VRBO, all that stuff. It is a viable way of collecting rent, and it's actually incredible. It's really good. However, I caution people, when you go into cities that potentially down the road might ban Airbnb stuff, like a lot of cities have banned Airbnb. You could find yourself in a world of trouble because you bought this whole house thinking like, hey, I'm going to make a ton of money here. And all of a sudden the city bans it. So look into all of that and be really sure of what you're getting into. I know just because we have a house in Big Bear, I feel really safe with that. Now, that house, I was like, it's never going to appreciate in value because Big Bear just doesn't appreciate all that much, right? And I thought to myself, what the heck, we can create all these great memories with the family, and then we can Airbnb it sometimes, and hopefully offset some of the payment. I kind of had worked out in my mind, if it costs me this much every month, it's cool. I'll be happy with it, and we'll have a family home. As it turns out, we barely ever get a chance to use it because it's always rented, and that's awesome. Now, here's what I learned about it is that your house will get demolished, and you got to just be okay with that. And you got to say, okay, X amount of money every single year is going to go towards fixing it all up. And if you own an Airbnb, you will pretty much recite these words at some point. What kind of animals do this kind of stuff? Because they do. It's incredible. So just know you're going to have to spend some money to clean it all up after the season's over, so to speak. And the other thing is it's going to take a little bit more work. You got to put more effort into it because you're not just dealing with finding one tenant and then just where's my paycheck every month. You're dealing with multiple tenants all the time. You're dealing with potential problems. So you got to have a good team of people that can handle any kind of toilet breakdown, electrical, right? Can't get a door lock, anybody like that. And then, of course, the really big, huge one is the cleaning crew that's going to clean your house. Super important because you got to get them in and out so the next tenants can come in. But Airbnb is an awesome model. Here's what I love about Big Bear is that there are not a lot of hotels up there. So I can't see them ever banning the Airbnb model because there's no hotels. They need it to keep Big Bear, flowing versus like Palm Springs area is a little dangerous. There's a lot of hotels up there. And quite honestly, if I owned one of the hotels, I'd be putting tons of pressure on the city saying, you got to be kidding me. You're taking revenue out of my pocket when I've made you so much money. And there's some big chains up there. So that's my story on Airbnb.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, that's similar to what I'm seeing is, there's a lot more work with Airbnbs. It could be in terms of short term a little bit more financially beneficial, but there's a lot more work and a lot more preparation you need to be able to have, and coordination you need to be able to have, and availability is a big thing too, because if they have something go wrong with that 5 o'clock at night on a Saturday, you need to address it, because one of the things with Airbnb too is that you need to have that host rating and make sure it's 5 stars, and if not, everybody else is going to be passing your house over. So you need to make sure that you have someone on there. If you're not in the location in the area, which if it's going to be someplace like Big Bear, most people aren't, have that reliable team that you talked about for any kind of issues, contractors that come up, anything like that. If you don't have that, you're going to be in trouble. Not only because it's going to make people angry, but those ratings go down, and then you're going to have less and less business, and it's going to take a while to try to build that back up again.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time and your input on that. I really appreciate it. Other than that, I'll also link the information for you to contact you if they have any questions about purchasing a second home or investment property. So that will be in the show notes. So if anybody's interested, go ahead and check that out. Other than that, I hope everybody has a great day and hope to see you next time. Bye.